this is not fiction. What you're about to hear is a true story. A day witnessed by hundreds, recorded in detail, and remembered as one of the darkest moments in marine park history. The sun blazed over SeaWorld Orlando, turning the surface of the pool into a sheet of glittering blue. Families filled the stands, children laughing, cameras ready. On the platform stood Dawn Brancheau, a veteran trainer with over 15 years of experience, and beside her, Tilikum, the largest orca in captivity, a 12,000-pound predator cloaked in black and white beauty. To the audience, it was a moment of wonder, the perfect bond between human and wild. But beneath that calm surface, something was shifting. In a single, shocking moment, the joy of the show would collapse into chaos. Whistles would pierce the air, the water would erupt, and the truth about these apex predators would be laid bare for the world to see. This is the real account of that day, and once you hear it, you will never look at marine shows the same way again. You're watching W Wildlife Documentary. Subscribe now and stay until the end, because this story is as real as it is unforgettable. Florida sunlight poured down in waves of gold, bouncing off the glassy surface of SeaWorld Orlando's main pool. The air was alive with the scent of salt water and popcorn, the mingled chorus of children's laughter, and the distant cry of seabirds drifting above. It was February 24th, 2010. Just another perfect day in the park's calendar of endless shows. Families filed into the Dine with Shamu Stadium, trays of food in hand, their chatter blending into the upbeat music playing over the speakers. Cameras were poised, eager to capture moments they believed would be nothing but joy. At the heart of the stage stood Dawn Brancheau, the park's star trainer. At 40 years old, she carried herself with a calm grace that only years of discipline could bring. Her wetsuit shimmered under the midday sun, droplets of water clinging to her like tiny crystals from the last performance. To the audience, she was the perfect image of confidence, a woman who could bridge the world between human and wild. Her partner for the afternoon was Tilikum, a towering presence beneath the surface. Weighing over 12,000 pounds, he was the largest orca in captivity, a creature of immense beauty and undeniable power. He circled slowly in the turquoise water, his dorsal fin cutting the surface like the blade of a ship. Dawn knelt at the pool's edge, her hand trailing in the water as Tilikum surfaced, his breath erupting in a misty plume. She smiled, that warm, unshakable smile that had made her a favorite among visitors and colleagues alike. For her, this was more than a job. It was a calling, a relationship built on trust, respect, and thousands of hours of training. The stadium swelled with applause as Tilikum obeyed her first cue, sending a curtain of water over the front rows. It was all so perfect, so ordinary in its spectacle. No one could have guessed that beneath that glistening surface, the story of the day would twist into something unthinkable, a performance that would never reach its curtain call. The water rippled like liquid glass as Dawn gave a subtle hand signal. Beneath her, Tilikum shifted course, his massive body gliding upward in a slow, deliberate arc. The crowd erupted when he broke the surface, his sheer size dwarfing the woman beside him. Droplets rained down like glitter under the Florida sun. To the untrained eye, it was magic, a flawless partnership between human and predator. But those who had spent years around orcas knew there was always a line, invisible yet ever present, between trust and instinct. Dawn had built her career walking that line. She leaned forward, touching Tilikum's rostrum with the ease of someone who knew his every breath. He responded with a deep exhale, mist clouding the air, then slid back beneath the surface. His black and white form moved with impossible grace for something so immense, a living paradox of beauty and danger. "Good boy," Dawn murmured, though the crowd couldn't hear it. This was their private language. Subtle cues, brief glances, the kind of connection forged only after years of repetition and mutual reliance. But even in moments like this, she never forgot what he was. He was not a pet. He was not tame. He was the ocean's power contained in flesh and bone, with a mind that remembered, calculated, and decided on its own terms. As the show continued, Dawn guided Tilikum through a series of maneuvers. Tail slaps that sent waves crashing over the front rows, spy hops where he rose vertically to eye the audience, breaches that drew gasps and camera flashes. The atmosphere was electric. Every cue answered, every trick perfect. Still, a few seasoned trainers watching from the side noticed something different. Tilikum's circles were tighter, his movements a shade too abrupt. Nothing alarming yet, just different. But the crowd saw only wonder. And why wouldn't they? From their seats, it was the dream, the fantasy of harmony between man and beast. No one could feel the subtle shift beneath the surface, the change in the water's rhythm. No one but Dawn. Stay with me, because this perfect image is about to fracture. What happens next will not only change the lives of everyone in that stadium, it will change the way we see these magnificent predators forever. The show was still in full rhythm, applause echoing off the stadium walls, the water shimmering like a sapphire under the midday light. Dawn stood at the pool's edge, her body angled toward the audience, one hand raised in a silent signal. Beneath her, Tilikum turned in a slow, deliberate spiral. His dorsal fin, tall and curved with the weight of years in captivity, cut the surface before vanishing again. The motion was hypnotic, yet there was something in it, a tightening, a focus that pulled at the edge of instinct. Dawn sensed it. It wasn't fear. Fear had no place here. Fear could cost you more than your life in this line of work. It was awareness, the sharpened sense that the space between them had grown different. She'd felt it before with other whales, an energy shift, like the subtle pressure drop before a storm. She crouched, offering Tilikum a visual cue. The orca responded, but the movement was slower, heavier, his great head lifting higher than usual. The spray from his breath caught her cheek, warm against the cool February air. "Good," she murmured, her voice calm, but her eyes studied him. His gaze met hers, dark and unblinking, as if weighing something unseen. From the stands, families laughed, oblivious to the silent conversation happening at the water's edge. Children reached out toward the splashes. Parents raised cameras, capturing what they thought was another perfect show. But from the trainer's platform, the details told a different story. The way Tilikum's body lingered close to the edge, the quick flick of his tail before settling, the slight delay in responding to cues he normally executed with ease. A fellow trainer at the side pool shifted uneasily, exchanging a glance with another. They'd seen these patterns before, subtle deviations, almost invisible to anyone but those who lived their lives reading the language of orcas. Dawn pressed forward with the routine, not because she ignored the signs, but because she believed in their bond. 15 years of trust didn't vanish over a change in mood. She offered another signal, and Tilikum responded with a shallow dive, resurfacing directly in front of her. For a moment, they locked eyes again. The world beyond the pool faded. The crowd, the noise, the sunshine. It was just her and him. In that fragile space, she thought she could feel the weight of his thoughts, the current of his intent. She smiled, steady, practiced, but inside, she couldn't shake the whisper in her mind. Something was shifting beneath the surface, and in less than a minute, that whisper would become a scream. The audience cheered as Dawn took her final position at the pool's edge, lowering herself so her boots brushed the surface. Tilikum floated before her, motionless but for the slow rise and fall of his breath. The sunlight glinted off his wet skin, every curve of black and white defined like a sculpture carved from the sea itself. Dawn extended her hand, a familiar gesture, a cue they had performed hundreds of times. Tilikum moved closer, his rostrum breaking the surface. She smiled, leaning just enough to brush her hand against him. And then it happened. The shift from stillness to violence was instant. No warning, no gradual build. In a single, explosive motion, Tilikum surged upward, his massive jaws clamping onto her arm and wetsuit. The water detonated around them in a spray of foam as the orca twisted, dragging her in one unstoppable pull into the deep. Gasps and screams erupted from the stands. At first, some still thought it was part of the performance, a daring dive, an underwater trick. But the sharp cries of the other trainers shattered that illusion. Whistles pierced the air, frantic hand signals cut through the chaos. But the black and white giant was already gone beneath the surface, Dawn with him. Underwater, the scene was a blur of bubbles and force. Dawn fought to twist free, but his grip was unyielding. Her lungs burned as he propelled her deeper, the light above shrinking, distorting. She kicked hard, straining for the surface, but each rise was met with another powerful drag down. On the platform, trainers rushed with nets, poles, and emergency lines. The water churned violently, the smooth rhythm of the show replaced by erratic, thunderous splashes. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then Tilikum surfaced again, but only his head and part of his body. Dawn was nowhere in sight. Murmurs swept through the stands, the horror settling in as realization struck. "Clear the area! Move back!" a trainer's voice shouted, but panic had already rippled through the crowd. Parents clutched their children, some stumbling toward the exits, others frozen, eyes locked on the boiling water. Beneath that restless surface, a battle raged. One woman's desperate fight against the raw force of a predator older than memory, and a creature's refusal to release what it had claimed. This was no longer a show. This was survival, and it was far from over. Stay with me, because what happens in the next moments will leave the stadium in stunned silence and change the history of SeaWorld forever. You don't want to miss what comes next. The instant Dawn's body broke the surface, the world narrowed to cold, crushing water and the relentless grip of Tilikum's jaws. He drove her down with the force of a collapsing wave, each movement deliberate, fueled by strength no human could match. Light fractured above, shrinking into a pale, unreachable disk. Her wetsuit clung tighter as the pressure deepened, the roar of the crowd fading into the muffled, distorted silence of the deep. She twisted, kicking hard, but every motion met the resistance of raw muscle and instinct honed over decades in the wild. Her hand reached for the safety release strap at her waist, but Tilikum shifted, twisting her sideways. The sudden torque ripped through her shoulder, sending a flare of pain that stole precious oxygen from her lungs. She fought to focus. Every diver's instinct screamed at her. "Don't panic!" yet the air in her chest was thinning, her heartbeat pounding in her ears louder than the water itself. For a heartbeat, Tilikum loosened his hold, just enough for her to break toward the surface. She clawed upward, the sunlight swelling larger, warmer, closer. Her lips parted, desperate for air. But before she could breach, a shadow swept from below. His tail flared, his body curved, and in an instant, she was wrenched downward again. The world spun, green, blue, black, a whirlpool of light and motion. On the surface, trainers shouted commands, their whistles shrill and useless. Nets slapped into the water, poles extended, but each attempt failed to close the gap between human hands and the predator's sheer mass. Dawn's limbs grew heavy, her vision blurred, edges darkening. Still, she kicked, fought, refused to surrender. The bond she had built over 15 years was not gone. She clung to the hope it could still reach him, still break through the haze of whatever had ignited this fury. But Tilikum's eyes, dark and ancient, showed no recognition now. Only the steady, cold focus of an apex hunter. Her lungs screamed. Her body begged her to breathe, to inhale, even if it meant taking in the sea. Her final, desperate thrust toward the fading light was met with another surge of brute force, pulling her back into shadow. The line between trust and survival had been crossed, and in this battle, there was no space for both. Above, the water stilled for a moment, as if the pool itself was holding its breath. The pool erupted once more, a violent churn of white spray, black fin, and thrashing limbs, then stilled without warning. Trainers froze mid-command, whistles clutched uselessly at their lips. The crowd's roar had long since withered into a fractured murmur, the kind that creeps into a room when no one wants to speak the truth aloud. From the upper rows, the water looked deceptively calm, a perfect blue mirror under the Florida sun. But near the center, it darkened, swirling faintly with a crimson thread that spread in fragile ribbons before dissolving into the depths. Tilikum surfaced, his immense frame breaking the quiet with a low, resonant breath. Beneath him, the shape of Dawn's body moved in the sway of his motion, still tethered, still beyond reach. One trainer leaned dangerously close to the water, voice shaking as he called her name. Another gestured frantically toward the holding gates, but the orca did not turn. His massive head dipped again, carrying her down. The crowd understood now. The gasps gave way to a suffocating silence, as if the entire stadium had been robbed of air. In that stillness, the contrast was unbearable. The sun's brilliance overhead and the cold shadow beneath. Parents held their children tighter, shielding them from the sight they themselves couldn't look away from. A few cameras kept rolling, the mechanical whir an unsettling reminder that tragedy, once witnessed, can never be undone. Minutes stretched. Each second waited with the realization that this was no longer a rescue. The pool, once a place of spectacle, had become a grave. When Tilikum surfaced again, he hovered without movement, as if listening to a rhythm only he could hear. The trainer's shouts grew softer, not out of surrender, but from the aching knowledge that some lines, once crossed, can never be walked back. The show was over, and the silence it left would echo far beyond the walls of SeaWorld. In the hours that followed, SeaWorld Orlando no longer felt like a theme park. The scent of salt and sunscreen had been replaced by something heavier, the weight of grief that clung to every corner of the stadium. The bleachers sat empty, their plastic seats still damp from the splashes of a show that would never finish. Tilikum was moved to a back holding pool, away from the public eye. There, he floated near the surface, his massive frame drifting slowly in circles. No whistles, no music, no crowd, just the quiet hiss of filtered water and the low hum of machinery. Some said he seemed restless. Others thought he looked calm. But no one could say for certain what lingered in his mind. The trainers, still in their wetsuits, gathered in a small break room. Faces pale, voices low. They replayed every moment, searching for an answer that would not come. Some stared at the floor, others into the distance, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and exhaustion. News crews crowded the park's gates by evening. Helicopters circled overhead, their blades chopping the air as the story spread across the world. Headlines framed the event as both tragedy and warning, a stark reminder that even in captivity, the ocean's predators remain what they are. Dawn's family arrived quietly, shielded from the press by park officials. They did not speak to cameras. Instead, they went to a private room where the walls were lined with photographs, images of Dawn smiling beside the very creature that had taken her life. That night, the stadium lights stayed dark. The surface of the main pool lay undisturbed, hiding the chaos that had unfolded just hours before. For the first time in years, SeaWorld closed its doors early. And though the park would open again, nothing inside its walls would feel the same. The death of Dawn Brancheau marked one of the darkest days in SeaWorld's history. It was more than the loss of a respected trainer. It was the shattering of an illusion. For years, audiences believed these massive predators could be molded into performers, their wild instincts dulled by trust and training. But Tilikum's final act proved a truth too many had ignored. An orca remains an apex predator, even in a tank. In the months that followed, SeaWorld ended all water-based performances with orcas. New safety measures were introduced, but for some, it felt like an answer to a question that should have been asked long before Dawn stepped onto that platform. Tilikum spent the rest of his life in isolation, a living reminder of the risks that come from crossing nature's boundaries. This story is not just about tragedy, it's a warning. A line exists between humans and the wild, and when it's crossed, the outcome is never guaranteed. Dawn knew the risks, and she faced them with grace, but even the strongest bond cannot erase instinct. If this story moved you, stay with us for more true accounts that reveal the raw power of nature, and subscribe so you never miss one.